one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the purposes of attendance, the clerk will call the roll.
Connor?
Here.
Geiger? Here. Gibson?
Here.
Jackson? Here. Parker?
Here.
Snelker?
Here.
Wade?
Here. Approval of written agenda. At this time, any commissioner or member of the public may ask for an item to be removed from the consent agenda and placed under items for consideration. Hearing no such request and without objection, the agenda is approved. Reports from state and county officers. Does any state or county officer or their representative have a report to share with the board?
Good morning. Matt Houchley, Undersheriff, Berry County. I've given each of you some of our statistics from March and April. May and June are now being accumulated and will be brought up here pretty shortly. Sorry for the delay. I don't really think there's anything too earth-shattering, though, from what we've been seeing. A large increase in the booking processes and the complaints, incidents handled. So we're still maintaining about a 35% increase in the last 5 years over time. That's a continual sort of a steady pattern that we're seeing as we go along. There is a number of numbers, if you will, that you can review, but in 2019 in March, you can see that we handled 660 complaints, and in April, we handled 627 complaints. Plenty of accidents, many of them car deers, unfortunately, which we all probably have had an experience with, or at least a close call at this point, driving around these county roads. So the statistics for the booking remain about the same. We are at a sort of maintaining a steady level of about 70 inmates with the cost of per meal staying at a very reasonable amount of $158 per meal for the month of March and $153 per meal for the month of April. We continue to do both drug screens at the jail and out in the field with our sobriety checks done by the deputies in the middle of the night. We continue to take fingerprints throughout the day for a variety of reasons, either employment or concealed weapons permits or court ordered. So there's a number of reasons people would come into our facility to have fingerprints taken. We continue to have those folks still coming through our parking lot at this point. The construction next door continues to go, and we've got to sort of work through some of the bumps in the road so that we can continue to get people coming in and out of our facility safely, despite the heavy equipment. And you can just imagine some of the mess that comes from having such a big project, but we are managing the best we can. So. One of the things that I will just mention for March and April, some of the repairs, the plumbing and HVAC, those things continue, quite honestly, to go on. There will be bigger numbers as we continue through the seasons, as we change from cold and wet to extremely hot. That does take a toll on our HVAC and plumbing system, especially the age that it is. Again, we're dealing with that on a case-by-case basis. We're currently dealing with some structural things that we're going to need to get some estimates on from some of the rain that's happening and washing out some of our supporting systems around the building itself, as it all kind of comes. As you know, our building is sort of sitting in a low area. So any questions that anyone might have? Mr.
Any updates on the chiller?
The chiller is in. Unfortunately, it went down this weekend. So this is a temporary chiller.
Oh.
For some reason, there is an electrical issue between the temporary chiller and the rest of the works in our boiler room. So we've had, I think it's BV that comes out for that, out yesterday, and they'll probably have to come out and figure out why the electrical keeps shutting down. But as you know, or you may be familiar with some of, when you put something new in place with old systems, you find the weakest point, and I think that's exactly what's happening, so.
Why do we have a temporary chiller?
The full-time chiller is still about 2 months out.
Okay.
The temperature in the building was getting to be unbearable. It was getting close to 85 in some areas, dealing with the population that we have, and quite honestly, the employees.
Oh, I
It
was in there, so.
Yes, so we definitely had to make something happen sooner rather than later.
Okay.
So.
I just didn't know that the new one that's coming was 2 months out.
Yes,
That's too bad.
we're hoping for sooner, but,
Thank you, Matt.
okay,
Any
thank
other-
you.
Have questions for Matt?
I would just also just offer a bit of caution for the residents and visitors to Berry County that the waters in the rivers and streams still remain high. We did have a bit of a minor crisis over the weekend when we had to deploy our Marine Patrol to pull some tubers out of the water when they got caught up in some debris that they didn't expect. The swifter water is definitely making things challenging for people, and they are running into unexpected problems when they lose control of the flow of the water and their steering capabilities in the higher water situations. So,
Thank you, sir.
thank you. Mhm.
Limited public comment. At this time, any member of the public wishing to address the board may do so for up to 3 minutes. Morning, Tammy.
Good morning. I'll take an open mic. Tammy Pennington from the Commission on Aging. I just wanted to invite you to a couple of things that are coming up at the COA. On July 16th, it's a Tuesday morning, so I know it's tough for you, but maybe you could join us out at Senior Day at the fair after your meeting. Lots of fun. I'm so excited because I have a bluegrass band coming this year. So that's that, and we have a speaker from Pierce Cedar Creek Institute talking about stewardship and mindfulness with the environment. So that should be good. The other thing, you will be getting an invitation, but just if you could get it on your calendar for August 22nd is our senior picnic out on the front lawn at the Commission on Aging. Lots and lots of fun. So if you don't like fun, don't come. But I know a couple of you really like fun, so come on out on August 22nd. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other limited public comment? Various correspondence. Does any commissioner have any correspondence to share with the board? Consent items.
Madam Chair, I move for approval of June 11th, 2019 Board of Commissioners meeting minutes. Item B, approval of June 18th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Item C, approval of the attached Granicus proposal for the annual renewal of the subscription-based software to track boards and commissions effective 9/12/19 till 9/11/20 in the amount of $7,560 with funds to be paid from the data processing fund. Item D, approval to spend $21,000 to repair, excuse me, and update the tower clock on the historical Berry County Courthouse with funds to be paid from the Building Rehabilitation Fund.
Second.
Motion by Gibson, supported by Smoker to approve the items listed on the consent agenda. Discussion is not allowed and a roll call vote is required. The clerk will call the roll.
Connor,
Yes.
Geiger,
Yes.
Gibson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Smelker,
Yes.
Wayne.
Yes, the consent agenda is approved. Presentations. This morning, we have a presentation by Joe Verlin of Gaybridge and Company for the 2018 audited financial statements for Berry County. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Welcome.
I would like to thank the board for allowing us to be able to serve as your audit firm. Again, my name is Joe Verlin from Gaybridge and Company. I'm one of the principals in charge of auditing services at the firm. And it was a pleasure working with the staff. This was our first year auditing Berry County, and everything went very smoothly. The process was efficient. We didn't have any significant adjusting journal entries, just we're very pleased with how well the audit went, especially given year one of the engagement. So I'm not going to go through and cover all 140 pages of the audit report just to make sure we get out of here at a reasonable time, but I will cover the highlights. And of the 140 pages, what matters the most is on page 2. And that's where we rendered the opinion on the financial statements. And we state that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial condition of the county as of December 31st, 2018. It's a clean opinion. It's the highest level of an opinion that we can provide on financial statements. The technical term is unmodified. I made the mistake of telling one of my clients that we were providing an unmodified opinion on their financials, and she was almost in tears and wanted to know what she needed to do to make sure they never got an unmodified opinion again. But it's actually the highest level of an opinion that we can provide. So it should always be the county's goal to get the unmodified opinion, but it does mean something to achieve it. Essentially, we were able to prove revenues and expenses, assets and liabilities to the point where we were comfortable putting our opinion on it. So definitely kudos to all the staff for, a lot of people participate in the audit engagement, and they did achieve the unmodified opinion. Underneath the opinion paragraph, we see something that's relatively unique. It's an emphasis of matter paragraph, and this comes along maybe every 5 years or so. And it really is just indicating something material to the financial statements that has changed. In this case, the county implemented Governmental Accounting Standard Board Statement number 75. It's the new retiree healthcare reporting standard. And instead of simply footnote disclosing the funded status for the retiree healthcare plan, we're actually including the liability on the statement of net position. And I'll point it out as we go through the report. Starting on page 5, we get into the management discussion and analysis section of the audit report. I would think of this as being the Cliff Note version of the entire audit, and it provides financial highlights. It explains how all these various financial statements articulate with each other, and it provides 2-year comparative data, so you can get a little bit of a sense for what trend that the county is showing with its finances. Starting in the first bullet point on page 5 in the financial highlights, the total net position of the county was $42.8 million at December 31st, 2018. What that number means, theoretically, is if all the assets were sold and liabilities were paid off, there'd be about $42.8 million left over. It's very much theoretical, but we do like to see that number increasing over time, and that was an increase of about $460,000 during the course of the year. This is on the accrual basis of accounting, which is the same basis of accounting that a corporation would use to report net income. So we'd like to see that number trending up, and the county did have a healthy increase in 2018. The second bullet point down shows the fund balances as of December 31st, 2018. So that's the more traditional method or way that we look at a government's finances. I would think of this as being more cash basis. So the total fund balances were about $14.3 million. And that was about a $540,000 increase during 2018. In other words, cash in exceeded cash out by about $540,000. So again, a very good sign. Third bullet point down shows that the general fund had an increase in fund balance of $352,071 in 2018. And we're focusing on the general fund here. It's the most important fund. If we look at just the unassigned fund balance, which is the amount that is available to cover the day-to-day cost of operating the county, wages, utilities, so on and so forth, there's about $2.2 million of unassigned fund balance. If we take that and divide it by the total expenditures, the county's at 14.3% funded. Most of our counties are somewhere between 10 and 20%, so you guys are well within that range. In addition to that, there are other funds that the county has earmarked for long-term reserves for building improvements, vehicle replacement, technology upgrades, things of that nature. There's another $1.9 million in the general fund that's been committed for those purposes, as well as another $3.6 million in the internal service funds. So 14.3% is stable, but in addition to that, there's other sources of resources that the county has set aside to be prudent and make sure that there's funds available to cover those long-term costs. We can also see that the total long-term debt decreased by about $1.5 million during 2018. And the last bullet point simply highlights the fact that there was a $1 million decrease in net position as a result of implementing the other post-employment benefit reporting standard. So those are just some of the highlights. Walking through the rest of management's discussion and analysis, if you turn now to page 9, we can see that the net pension liability increased from about 14.3 million to about 16.3 million during 2018. This was the 4th year that the county has implemented the relatively new pension reporting standard. So about a $2 million increase in the net pension liability, entirely related to a down market performance during 2018. So that was entirely the cause for that increase in net pension liability. Over the course of the next 20 years, that number is going to be fully funded. But there's going to be ups and downs depending on how the market swings. And if you look at the unrestricted net position of the county, the unrestricted net position, even though net pension liability increased, unrestricted net position increased as well by about $330,000 during 2018. So that's trending in the correct direction. And if you turn now to page 10, we get a look at comparative revenues and expenses for the county for each of the last 2 years. And 5 rows up from the bottom, we can see that total expenses increased from just over $43 million in 2017 to $45.2 million in 2018. That is largely, again, a result of the pension. Because the market performance was down and the pension plan, it increased the amount of expense that the county needed to recognize related to the pension plan. That was $1.48 million of the increase alone. So, but for the market performance, actually the performance was very consistent. The increase in net position would have been very consistent with the prior year. Going through the rest of the report, if we take a look at the footnotes and go all the way to page 62, we get just a quick snapshot of the increases and decreases in the county's net pension liability during 2018. And as I mentioned before, net pension liability was $11.4 million at the beginning of the year. And the net investment income during 2018 was actually a decrease or a net loss of $1.6 million. That's the primary reason. And obviously, we expect to have an 8% rate of return on the assets, somewhere between 7 and 8%. It was actually negative during 2018. So that is certainly the primary reason for the increase in net pension liability up to the $15.5 million that's reported at December 31st, 2018. And if you turn now to page 73, we get a look at the changes in that net pension liability for each of the last 4 years, as well as how well funded the county is in covering its net pension liability. As of December 31st, 2018, the county's total net pension liability, according to the actuaries, was $54.2 million. In order to cover that liability, $38.7 million has been set aside by the county, leaving the difference of $15.5 million. If we take the total assets and divide it by the total liabilities, the county is at 71.4% funded. And a lot of our counties are struggling to be north of 60%. Treasury expects at least a 60% funding. Berry is about 11.4% better than the minimum threshold that Treasury has set. So in stable condition in terms of covering that long-term net pension liability. And if you turn now to page 74, you can see that the county has consistently been paying not only the minimum amount that the actuaries have been stating needs to be paid in each year to stay on track to cover that liability. There's been anywhere from $500,000 of additional payments made annually up to $2.25. So again, just prudence by the board and in management to make sure that enough resources are being set aside to fully fund that net pension liability. And those are I'm sorry, I had one more page. If you turn now to page 75, we get a look at the OPEB liability. And this is the first year that we've included these types of schedules. The actuarial evaluation actually provided 3 years worth of data, so we do have 3 years of comparative data. So you can see the trend that the OPEB liability is heading. And in 2018, the total OPEB liability, according to the actuaries, was just over or just under 1.1 million. And the total assets to cover the OPEB liability is 1.47 million. And leading to a net OPEB asset of $380,000. You guys are very rare. I don't have any other clients that have a net OPEB asset. So in other words, you guys have already set aside more than enough to cover your retiree health care benefits. Very unique and very just a sign of a very stable and prudent financial management. It's not very often. I think I've been referring to it as an OPEB liability just out of habit, but it's actually an OPEB asset. You guys have set aside an extra $380,000. So those were the highlights I wanted to cover, and I'm more than happy to take any other questions the board might have.
Does anybody have any questions for Joe? Wow, no questions. That stuns me.
Good presentation.
I asked all of mine to Michael a couple of days ago.
So how many counties do you audit?
We audited a dozen counties.
Okay. So, thank you, sir.
Sure, glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Next on our presentation list is Eric Hackman from Tower Pinkster.
Tough one to follow.
It kind of is. We like to have all those glowing, nice, wonderful accolades. They don't belong with these 7 individuals. They belong with Mr. Brown. So give credit where credit is due. We just approve the stuff that he recommends.
There should be a PDF that I sent. It's like a PowerPoint presentation.
Here.
Did I send you the right thing?
I've had that problem this week too.
You should have all received initial summary report, correct?
Yep.
You all have that. So I've pulled together a simple PowerPoint presentation that sort of summarizes this and it creates a discussion. When we first endeavored on trying to figure out how best to use the FOC building and whether or not how much of the health department might fit in there, or if the health department might fit in there, I thought it'd be an easy answer. Over the course of the last several weeks, it's proving not to be an easy answer. I met with the health director, health department director a couple weeks ago, and reviewed her program, reviewed her space allocations in her existing building. If you can go to page number 3. One more, I'm sorry. Page 4. The building is simply divided into, go to the next one. The building is simply divided into 4 or 5 main areas within the building. The blue area being that clinical spaces, and the green being the environmental services, and the yellow being sort of a flex space that serves both the clinical side and the environmental services side. The white area being public space or shared services within the building. So you can see that the program itself lays out to be fairly divided. In my conversations with Colette, am I pronouncing her name correctly?
Yeah, she's right here.
Oh,
Good morning. It would appear as though that the program could be split. There's not a lot of interaction between the green side and the blue side as far as services provided. The building was designed in that way, in that it has this large shared space between the 2 sides of the building. So we looked at the quantity of square footage that was available at the front of the court building. If you go ahead 3 more slides. And the building itself, due to its historic nature, is not a very efficient use of space. So from a gross square footage, there's a lot of space there, but from a net square footage that's usable, it gets to become fairly limited. So we did some sort of just playing around with how things might fit, and the environmental health side of the health department does fit within the FOC building. Fits fairly nicely without any major changes to the way they work, in that everybody that comes that has multiple locations that they work still has a place to land that would be pretty much their own to land at, the way they work today at the current health department building. But it does divide them into 2 floors, so those spatial relationships that they have now that would be simply right outside their door to another workstation would be departed by a floor. And then this entire unit, mostly the administration and the finance piece, would be completely remote from the clinical side of the department. Am I making sense when I say that? So in doing so, you would have to divide the department in half. You can go back 1 slide. So when we look at the programmatic layout of the existing health department building, the red area becomes that clinical space, and the blue areas could conceivably be renovated and reallocated for Commission on Aging, which then takes their roughly 20,000 square foot program and begins to plug it into the 6 or possibly 7,000, 8,000 square feet of renovation space. We could still use the shared public entry and public toilets, create a shared break space in the back, which then begins to limit the amount of new construction that would need to occur for the community or the Commission on Aging. You go ahead 4 slides to the site plan. We begin looking at how that might lay out on the site, and realizing that we didn't want to impede on any of the staff parking in the back. When you look at the overall site, it appears as though the master plan always intended for there to be an addition to the east of the health department building, the way the parking is pushed away from the building to the east. So we're looking there at somewhere in the range of a 13,000 square foot addition onto this building, and that would then put all of the Commission on Aging in that location next to the clinical services of the health department. Now, that seemed, in my mind, a fairly simple division of program. It seemed advantageous from a cost perspective, but it does diminish the connection currently between the environmental health services within the health department and the clinical side. And I thought that it would be a huge financial gain, financial savings from doing this approach. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that in your report I provided 4 different options. The first option would be building a whole new COA, utilizing the 20,000 square foot program that was in the initial master plan. It comes to roughly $6 million. If we were to do, as the diagrams show, where we would move the environmental health services downtown to the FOC and put on a 13,000 square foot addition and do renovations inside the current health department, we are roughly $5.25 million. The third and fourth options, the third option would be to only squish the programmatic space of the health department in its current location, and then still do an addition to this building. The amount of addition is still fairly large, and so it didn't really wash out to make sense to do that, because it limits the efficiency and workflow of the health department, but also costs you nearly the same amount. So I wouldn't advise doing that. And then the third option, or the fourth option, which really isn't feasible, is to try and put the entire health department downtown. It just doesn't fit in that building at all. The thought of moving the environmental versus moving the clinical to downtown is that from a building's renovation part, you have already invested capital in the clinical spaces. They're a more specialized type of development, and therefore building that downtown, you have to then recreate all of that investment, where the environmental side is more of an office-based and could conceivably move right into the downtown office space without much renovation in the FOC building at all. So what I thought when we started this would be a fairly easy answer. It boils down to about $800,000. One thing I can guarantee you, when you look at these numbers, every one of them is wrong, but I'm giving you my opinion. You won't realize the actual number until things are bid, but I'm giving you an idea of an order of magnitude to give you how to help make a decision. So between those two options, it's about an $800,000 difference. In conversations, what becomes of the FOC building? Do you sell it? And does that fund the other $800,000? What is the value of the FOC building? That's beyond my expertise. Maybe the gentleman that just gave his report knows what the value of that asset is. But there's, I think, also a flexibility that comes with the FOC building in that it provides additional parking and overflow parking for your other things downtown. I failed to mention one other item related to moving the environmental services downtown, is that the center space within the existing health department, the space between the two portions of the health department, is a large conference room. Can you go back to the, I'm going to say it's page 5? 6? Yeah, right there. Thank you. They hold board meetings, community outreach, seminar space. It works as meeting space. It's dividable, so it can be divided between the front and the back half. In the option of moving the COA into this building, that space becomes viable to allow the COA to move into. The thought process we had to maximize your resources would be to move those functions, those seminar spaces and board meetings and community outreach, to your MSU extension space, the old library here, right downtown.
Thank you, Eric. Does anybody have any questions for Eric today?
I
Hi, Vivian.
I'm sorry. I had a question about the clinical space, because I didn't have that in my packet, and I'm sorry, I used paper, but I didn't have that. So the clinical space, is that for like the programs that they hold?
So they're providing immunizations and WIC services and some other community health-related services. The two major are the immunizations and WIC, and they're operating either in Eaton County or in Berry County, but they tend to either flip the two programs and when they're doing it. But sometimes they have all of those going on. And it's a program and services that will grow and shrink based on what's going on and based on the funding available from the state. They currently use about 75% of those clinical rooms on a regular basis. And I wouldn't want to...
Daily, or when you say 75%, do you mean like daily, or?
No, it's tough to say because it goes up and down. I think Colette, I'm sorry. Colette could answer that more distinctly than I can.
Okay.
Ben?
So do you have a recommendation?
I think I thought it would be more clear cut as to when we looked at this. $800,000 is $800,000. That's the order of magnitude this decision weighs. And does the FOC building allow you to fund that $800,000 difference? There are efficiency losses when using the FOC building. Now, one of those losses is in the health department's operations. Mm-hmm. The other is that is not your best building when it comes to efficiency from operations. It's an older building, single pane glass. If you were to build a new building, it would operate as one of your best from a energy efficiency and, ongoing costs. Your health department building was designed as a health department building, and it functions very well as a health department building. And it is a very nice building, and it operates as an efficient building. So it's not as clear cut as I thought it would be when we thought this would be the answer.
So it's $800,000 if we segment the health department's functions across the city of Hastings.
Correct.
All right.
In a capital cost.
In a capital cost,
Yeah.
all right. So the meeting space component, there's no place for shared space within that proposed
Within the,
building, if you combine it with the COA?
we could leave that space as shared space, but then you have to add more space as an addition to COA.
Okay.
So we were looking for the most cost-effective most capital cost-effective solution, and utilizing your spaces as best as we could with what we know.
If the COA were to vacate the current building, do you have a recommendation what you would do with it? Just demolish it?
Yes. Based on what we learned 4 years ago, it was in pretty bad shape.
Yeah. Great. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Eric? Thank you, sir.
Can I ask a couple questions, son? In the process, this is the start of this. I know there's a bigger piece to it with the sheriff's department and that. As you went through this, I concur with you that some of these numbers might be mythical until we get them actually on a bid sheet. Because being on the health board, spending time there, it's office space, clinical space. It would take some significant renovations to make that into COA functionality, as far as changing that, the interior room on that. How do you guys price point that to come up with the numbers on what that would cost?
It's a little bit of guessing, but we've got other projects that we've done recently that can kind of give us an idea of square foot costs. The market's fairly volatile from a labor perspective right now. We've seen huge increase in inflation over the last several years, just because the state of Michigan is investing a lot of money, as private, not just the state, but the state of Michigan is, as I've said for the last several years, is open for business. All contractors welcome, because the contractors are having difficulty finding labor. I've heard stories of contractors or laborers leaving one contract and going down the street and getting a $1.50 raise just to walk off a job and go work at another one, which just drives up the bidding costs. So I'm basing it on what we've seen recently, but I'm also basing it on, if you said, Eric, go do this project right now, that if you said $6 million to go build that building, I know that you're covered. There's contingency included. All the numbers are big enough to cover your project if you were to start here, in the next 12 months. Okay. Can it be done cheaper? Absolutely. And that's where you have the conversation of what you can do to make the design more cost effective. But I think it's what you would do in one scenario, you would do in the other. And I tried to make them as apples to apples as we could so that you would understand it's about an $800,000 decision.
Okay. And the efficiencies, when you talk about just, energy efficiencies, green efficiencies, some of the, new building versus old building, in that 800,000 is a big number, but over 20 years, is 800,000 a big number when you look at the amount of energy, electricity, inefficiencies in the current front of the court building? I mean, what are you seeing look at our old sheriff's department, and I know our utilities, at one point, they were talking about $8,000 a month, in utilities versus a new efficient building.
Without getting into the details of a new design, it's hard to say. Tower Pinkster has done projects where we have estimated what we thought the savings would be of a design, and it's been double that.
Double the 800,000?
No, double the savings we projected in
Savings you
energy.
projected, okay.
In energy savings. We're able to do some really fine energy efficient buildings.
Interesting. The other, and this is more of a, we're in the process right now, and we've talked about the courts and law building of moving the front of the court, staff into the courts and law building. The reason that we're doing that is for the efficiencies of putting that staff together under one roof, better communication. This project basically goes away from that model and says, hey, it's great here, but let's split it there. I'm not sure that having the health department in different segments is good for the taxpayers to try to figure out where they're going to find people, clinical versus environmental, having people set up, because being in that office and spending time in both offices, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, obviously communication that goes on like that. So I'm not sure that efficiency, I'm not sure how you put a value on that efficiency versus the price tag versus the projected 800,000 in that. So it's an interesting report to read through. And I appreciate your honesty in the fact that the numbers are, in fact, until you put them on paper and get them bid, that in this market, things change quick. So, it is interesting to see. So, but that's eye-opening, and it's actually interesting to see how close they all are together. 800,000 is a big number, but yet it still puts you, when you look at some of the other factors involved in it, it's interesting. So,
That's a good point. We're trading efficiency in one department for inefficiency in another.
Vivian had a question.
I have a question for Michael.
Vivian had a question.
So I know, but you're gonna maybe say part of this, but because you can't answer about costs. Could you go back to this screen as well? So the existing health department, did you look at a plan to add on an expansion here for the COA, okay, or whatever, but did you think about adding on here for the health department to expand for their needs, and then get rid of both the front of the court and the COA building properties? Excuse me.
Yes, and that was in your report. I think it was option 4. From a cost perspective, if you were to, I don't think the health department building you would actually put an addition on. I think you would just, and I'm going to use a very technical term, squish them as tightly as you could into the west half of the building, and then put the addition of the COA on the other side and somehow take advantage of the extra space. But it's nearly the same cost, because you're renovating not only the space you'd renovate if you moved them out, but also additional space, and then you're still doing an addition.
Right.
And then,
But you were just talking about getting rid of just the front of the court property.
yes, I'm not following your example then, I guess.
Okay, so with this, I assume this is the health department if we decided to move environmental health out.
Correct.
Correct.
It would just be the red area or the,
But what if you added on, I believe, if I'm looking at the building right, that would be to the north. If you added on actually to the building to make bigger for the health department side, and then added this expansion for the COA on both ends, and then the possibility of looking at getting rid of both those properties, the existing property that fronts the highway from the front of the court, that's not here anywhere, and then also the front of the court building. I mean, you didn't even,
I'm not following the two front of the court buildings.
one's the COA building to get rid of that,
Correct.
and then the front of the court building.
I would not advise building an addition for the health department. They currently have a home, and to put an addition and then renovate existing space to basically build an addition on the building for COA, I think it'd be more advisable to allow this building to operate the way it is, and build a new COA. That way, there's no cost related to renovating the health department building. There's no reason to put an addition on the health department building for the health department uses. The only reason we would move the health department out of the health department, or the environmental side out of the health department building, is to minimize the amount of addition.
Guess I'm not making myself clear.
Can somebody help me understand?
She's just saying.
I'm just saying
Have
put
you
'em-
looked at liquidating the properties? If you sell the COA property and sell the FOC property, and you put all of the buildings together in that current complex.
With an expansion, put everything in that with an expansion for the health department and an expansion for the COA, and then get rid of the other two properties.
I think you're in that $6 million ballpark.
Still?
Yes.
But we still would have another property to get rid of.
I think you have a new property to get rid of when you build a new COA building. Wherever you build a new COA building at, either attached to this building or in another location.
Ben?
Michael,
Sorry about that.
I have a question for you. Let's talk about execution. How much cash do we have in the tax umbrella fund? And what are the procedures that this board would need to go through to start construction?
Now that we have the audit, I'll finalize that, but above the cap, I think we have 1.2 million above the cap is a number I'm going to safely throw out there. I don't like to deal with, I like to deal with decimal points, so
Yeah.
and I just don't have that at the moment. But 1.2 million is a number that I believe is very close. And according to the policy, the board would just need a 2/3 majority to
dip into that, to the reserve. And the reserve,
It might not be, it might be to go below the cap, you need the 2/3. Again, I apologize, I didn't bring that policy with me. I know that to go below the cap, you need a 2/3 majority. It might only require just a majority to utilize what's in excess of the cap.
well, construction costs aren't getting any cheaper. And I think we have a good plan here. We should probably decide what we're going to do pretty quick.
No matter what you do, you're gonna have to go for a millage, right?
No, not for this.
What part are you talking about?
Not for the COA portion. If you have, you can, the jail, of course, you're going to have to go for a millage because there's no way you can pay the cost of repaying back the bonds. But for the COA, that's a cost that we could absorb, right, Michael? If we just sold bonds or dipped into the reserves? If we had to go find $5 million?
We had to find 5 million. I'm not prepared to say that we.
Me neither.
So
have
we would
$5
need a
million
millage?
worth of that $5
We just
million
heard how
worth of
fiscally
cash.
responsible he is.
No, what I'm asking is, do you have to go for a millage for that 5 million?
Yeah,
How much is in the tax umbrella fund?
1 point.
That's above the cap.
The whole umbrella fund
Mm-hmm.
is 9 million.
Okay, that's the question.
But I want to clarify that the tax umbrella fund is there for a purpose. I mean,
Yeah.
it does have a, if you choose to go, and that's why the board put that policy in place, is if you choose to spend below that cap, then there are implications that occur.
And when was the last time we used below the cap dollars?
Many years ago, to do the health department project.
To build the health department.
So,
But I do want to clarify.
so I'm not crazy. It's been done before.
Oh, Michael, finish.
No, just that it did take us a number of years to then rebuild that. fund back up. We are also utilizing the interest and revenue off of the fund above the cap. It's still growing a bit, but not as aggressively because, as you recall, we commit $500,000 of those revenues to go toward the unfunded liability on the pension.
Vivian?
When-
And then Dana.
Excuse me. Thank you. So when the treasurer makes the makes the township whole after tax time, so she, right now, doesn't she have the ability to use some of those funds to do that?
That is the intent of the 100% tax payment fund, the umbrella tax fund. There's numerous
And so that,
names for it. The tax revolving fund is
Right.
exactly.
so if
that
we were to deplete that, then she might have to find financing.
the process reverts then to the treasurer going to local banks to borrow the money and going through that process. Not preferred. Sue isn't here. And would certainly want her to weigh in on that discussion, but I'm certain that she would say her preference is not to have to go. There's a whole lot of efficiency that comes with having the 100% tax payment fund fully funded for revolving purposes.
And it's just a trade-off. It's raise taxes or,
Can I butt in here? Okay. If front of the court building is sold, did you look at any options for parking? Or additional parking somewhere else around here? Is there anything available? There's nothing available then either, is it?
I did not expand my scope to do a parking analysis of the area.
Okay.
Tammy had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a little concern. Thank you, Madam Chair. And it speaks to parking particularly. My concern with combining the Commission on Aging into the Health Department building is that that's a narrow traffic pattern through there caused by that retention pond. And so I have concerns about seniors having to park on the other side of the retention pond and walking over with transit buses using the same traffic pattern. And we, of course, have a lot more traffic with the Meals on Wheels program and getting in and out. So that's just a consideration. I don't know if moving that retention pond then would become part of that.
We could always turn your old building into a retention pond. I would let you. Did anybody else have any questions for Eric? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Oh, I did.
Oh, okay.
When will we see something on the jail?
We'll start meeting this summer. We'll start meeting with the jail on that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's take a 10-minute break or 5-minute break.
Okay.
Be back here at 10.